Tonight on Primetime, London and Beijing are reopening a diplomatic channel that has largely been frozen since 2018. The British Prime Minister is now in China, signalling a shift in tone after a period marked by mistrust, trade friction, and political distance. A reset with Beijing, but on whose terms? Good evening. Keir Starmer has held talks with President Xi Jinping, describing the visit as turning into a new point in how London approaches relations with China. Now, it's the first time a British leader has made the trip in more than 6 years, and it comes after a long period of diplomatic frost. Well, the three-day visit is focused on rebuilding trust, strengthening economic links, and exploring strategic cooperation, all while navigating the sensitivities that have defined the relationship in recent years.
UK hopes to strengthen economic and strategic ties with China and hopes to open new opportunities for British businesses after strained relations. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday, as well as with Premier Li Qiang and Chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Zhao Leiji.
We've agreed that on tariffs of whisky, we're looking at how they're to be reduced, what the time frame is, visa-free travel, how far, how much, and when that can start, and on the information exchange on small boats, the cooperation that we need, within a dialogue actually about greater strategic focus on security and defence. But for us, it's very important on small boats that we get our arms around the engines that are being used in those small boats. So on all those three areas, but they're examples of a much wider opening of access for business that we discussed at great length in terms of the fact that after 8 years, this is the first visit by a Prime Minister, and we wanted to make sure that we've got that strategic approach on all of these issues.
Starmer is accompanied by leaders from more than 50 major British companies. Representatives from key sectors include finance, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, culture, and the creative industries. Experts say there should be a number of deals made between both countries.
For this visit, one of the things we're going to have to get on board with is the idea that China is indeed a technology superpower now. And we have to work out how we're going to engage with that. There are things that China's doing in cancer research, in pharma, in other areas, which are very, very important. And we have to work out how do we engage with China, how do we research with China. It's our second largest research partner after the United States. We just have to have more clarity about whether we can go ahead with these, or if we say no, whether we're willing to bear the costs in that.
This 4-day visit marks the first by a British Prime Minister to Beijing since 2018. It comes against the backdrop of increasingly tense relations with the United States and is seen as a potential turning point in UK-China relations. These have been strained for years over issues such as the curtailing of political freedoms in Hong Kong, China-Russia cooperation, and allegations by British security services.
Well, my first guest tonight is joining us from Chongqing in China, Mr. Alex Reporterfy, who is a geopolitical analyst. Alex, very nice to have you with us. It's not just the UK, is it? The whole of Europe really seems to be pushing for much deeper engagement with China. Is this just practical diplomacy, or are we seeing a concerted but subtle shift away from Washington, do you think?
Well, I think this started at the WEF with Mr. Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. He laid out the terms of what's going to be going on here in the next 10 to 20 years. And doing business with America is very tricky for most nations. So as Mr. Carney pivoted to China, we are now seeing the Europeans come into line saying, wait a minute, that's not a bad deal. Here's a trading partner that hasn't been in world conflict since 1979, and they want to do business. And why are we being bullied by the Americans? The Chinese are welcoming us with open arms. And I think Keir Starmer also got on the plane there and may have just saved his political party at the next elections here.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Under a huge amount of pressure domestically and looking like the great statesman abroad, which obviously generally plays well with voters. Often, Mr. Carney's speech was pretty direct, very eloquent. Often European leaders have been using sort of borderline euphemisms, haven't they? Things like strategic autonomy. Do you think that this is driven by economic realism, or is there a real frustration with the US at the moment?
Well, real frustration, of course. If you say something that is not within the Washington regime, you are outcasted and you will hit the headlines the next morning with the threats of 100 to 200 to 300% tariffs on your businesses. I mean, there's a lot of America that actually is here in China, and they've been, doing quite well and successfully over the years. A lot of those profits go back to shareholders of American companies. Well, now the British have said, wait a minute, you're making China out to be bad, but you're still trading a lot with them. You got a great trading deal with them. Why can't we have part of that pie? Now, the moment that somebody engages with the Chinese government, just like Mr. Carney did over a week ago, he was threatened with 100% tariffs. So I think what we're seeing here is now the Europeans are coming into line. Carney is well known in the United Kingdom for his performance and time that he did with the Bank of England. And everyone's saying, wait a minute, maybe this guy is going to be the lead on this. And what's interesting is he hasn't backed down. And I think that's giving a lot of momentum here for the British to come in there. Showmanship for sure. Beijing has welcomed them with open arms. Beijing doesn't bomb, bankrupt, or bully nations. It does business with nations.
And I suppose that gives it a certain sense of realism. But do you think there's any sense in which within Beijing officials look at this and say, well, hang on a minute, this is just short-term expediency. This is a response to Mr. Trump, a response to tariffs. This is not a long-term commitment. Or is it more nuanced than that?
Well, you said it correctly. Is it more nuanced? Look at what Russia has done with its trade over the last 3 years with China. It's rebuilt its economy from sanctions that have been hit for over 20 separate sanction packages. The Chinese and the Russian business has changed. That has changed. Those relationships are not pretty much going back to Europe. China is a big country that needs a lot of resources. China is a country that needs oil and gas. It needs, lumber. It needs what Russia is long. China needs it. So they understand that. Now, when the British come over here, here's the amazing thing about the Chinese government. I mean, they have something every year called the 2 sessions. They make a 5-year plan. They plan for 5 years. The Brits come to town. They do some deals. Everybody goes home. Business as usual. No drama. But the moment that the United States comes rolling in, there's threats. There's threats to damage the economy. And hey, this is from a nation that thinks it's acceptable to go into sovereign nations, pull out leaders, drag them in front of their own court in the United States and say, well, don't worry, Venezuelans, we'll take care of you. Who's next on America's list? Is it Iran? Is it China? Is it, a European country? Is it Greenland? So I think the Europeans and, of course, the Brits, this is a very smart move by Keir Starmer to bring his delegation and to bring some companies over here. That's exciting. And we just may see some softening on the new energy vehicle market here, just like with Mr. Carney did with China.
It's very interesting, this role that business plays with Chinese sort of bilateral relations, because and you can see it very clearly with the Starmer situation. There are all sorts of geopolitical tensions, arguments going on around the London embassy, the so-called mega embassy. Very few of Mr. Starmer's voters can agree on whether they think that's a good or a bad thing. But the moment you start talking about longer-term business deals, economic cooperation, very few people are likely to disagree with that.
I mean, we can see what's happening with the confidence in the U.S. economy right now. I mean, today is a big down day on the S&P. Interest rates were kept at 2%, something like that, 2 to 3% in that range with the Fed yesterday. The average person didn't like that. I know the Trump administration wants the Fed to continue to lower the rates. And this is why we're seeing a surge in gold. Gold blew past $5,000 an ounce, no problem. Silver blew past $100 an ounce, no problem. Natural gas was up 100% in weeks. These are biblical moves in commodity markets and oil and gas markets. And this will come out somewhere. And this ain't going to come to the U.S. economy very well when a lot of these companies that had a lot of growth in AI, a lot of growth in semiconductors, a lot of growth in other industries that rely on these precious metals and cheap energy. It's doomsday for the American economy. And I think Keir Starmer says, wait a minute, guys, I think the U.S., even though they think they're the hottest economy in the world, he knows a little bit more, I think, than he's letting on. And there's a reason why they're sitting at the table in Beijing. I think it's a brilliant move. Yes, it's going to be met with skepticism from, political parties. They always use that China bad, China bad, China bad line. But this one here, watch, he's going to come out of this one, and he just may actually do much better if an election is called here in the United Kingdom soon.
Okay, Alex, we thank you very much indeed for joining us from China.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, staying with China, joining us now from Beijing is Colonel He An, Secretary General of the Horizon Insight Center. Now, his work focuses on China's foreign policy outlook, strategic diplomacy, and Beijing's approach to major global partners, including Europe and the United Kingdom. Colonel, thank you very much indeed for joining us on A News Primetime. We appreciate it very much indeed. I'd like to start by asking you about Beijing's perspective. How significant is this visit, do you think, in restoring stability many years after strained relations with London?
Hi, good evening. Yes, over the past 8 years, Britain's policy toward China has grown increasingly hardline, with high-level interactions virtually stalled. Starmer's visit marks the shift in China-UK relations from downward spiral back to a track of manageable competition and cooperation, establishing a new tone of pragmatic cooperation while managing differences. The high-level dialogue provides a stable framework for future interaction between the two sides, widely interpreted as a journey of breaking the ice. We see it's rebalancing UK-US relations. The UK has developed a new understanding of the unpredictable nature of its alliance with the Trump administration. By pursuing pragmatic cooperation with China, it aims to expand its diplomatic space and avoid being forced to choose sides between the US and China. This visit seems a key demonstration by Britain's pursuit of an influential independence from its foreign policy stance.
It's very interesting, Colonel, because we've heard very similar language from both sides. We heard Sir Keir Starmer talk about a need for a more strategic approach. We've heard this word pragmatism be mentioned a number of times. What then does Beijing expect from this more sophisticated relationship with the UK?
We think that China looks forward to establish a mature relationship with the UK. And first, maybe cooperation, let cooperation take off, then manage differences and ultimately improve global governance. First, ending the Ice Age since 2016, we wish to establish a new framework for the interaction that is calm, pragmatic, and controllable. President Xi Jinping proposed that transcending differences, respecting each other, and transforming the greater potential of China-UK cooperation into great achievements in practice. Operational goals such as restore the three major mechanisms: annual Prime Minister meeting, strategic dialogues, and financial dialogues, and first normalize the high level of hotline.
Thank you, Colonel. And it's very interesting, this, because of course it's not just about bilateral relations with the UK, it's also the UK relationship. It also forms part of the wider European relationship with China. And we know, as we've discussed with our previous guest, that there is much more, there's an intensification of effort and interest from Europe into doing more, frankly, with China. Which sectors is Beijing looking at? Which industries does it perceive could be the most lucrative for both parties?
I'd mention to 6 areas, such as green energy and energy storage, digital healthcare and life science, financial services, interconnectivity, and high-end manufacturing and smart vehicles, creative industries and culture IP, carbon market and ESG services. Those areas may have our shared interests.
And of course, the world is changing very significantly. Often people now talk about a multipolar world rather than a multilateral world. How does China see its role in this new world when it comes to keeping dialogue open with Western partners like Britain?
I think China positions itself as a bridge for dialogue in a fractured world and stabilizing forces, rather than an adversary seeking to build something new. Our Foreign Minister Wang Yi stated that China is willing to be a stabilizing force, a force for progress, and a force for peace in a turbulent world. So I think China doesn't position itself as a core adversary. Instead, China views dialogues with Western partners like the UK as a restabilizing force, providing anchor of certainty for the international order.
Well, Colonel, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis. We appreciate it very much indeed. Thank you for joining us there from Beijing. Okay, to London now, and we're going to speak to Kelvin Lam, a senior China economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics. Now, he specialises in China's growth outlook and trade dynamics. Kelvin, great to have you on the show. When you look at this purely through an economic lens, does it actually move the needle, do you think, between China and the UK?
Thanks for having me on the show, Guy. I think if you look at the concrete outcomes revealed so far in the press that Keir Starmer was saying, they managed to secure most notably the reduction of tariff on whiskey and the talks of visa-free travel to China, which facilitates economic and people exchanges. I mean, diplomatically, the Chinese are only considering a relaxation of visa policy only, like what they said to Canada. So nothing is yet set in stone. But if you think about it, when something as straightforward as visa-free access is not offered straight away, it suggests that both sides are still actually weighing their respective bargaining chips. Right? I mean, for example, Britain's professional services expertise and soft power versus China's very big markets.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure that there will be more favourable announcement coming, but as a result, we don't expect any substantial agreements or breakthrough on market access in services or major business deals to be forged. We don't also expect any announcements on any starting of negotiation of new trade deals with China because Britain had left the EU. Well, I think the trip looks like a calculated reset for the UK. Yes. But remember that this visit was initiated and invited by Beijing. So I think there may be other motivations or even agendas from the Chinese side behind these flurry of middle power visiting China. I mean, if you look at who invited whom in these visits, there's a chance that Beijing is orchestrating these visits to isolate Washington.
That's very interesting, because I must admit, I was talking to some other British colleagues, friends of mine about this. And to be frank, I'm British, and I was sort of wondering, well, what have we really got to offer? I mean, financial services regulation, some soft power. But to be honest, it doesn't seem like much, really, to warrant such interest from Beijing. So what is it you think that China really wants to get out of this relationship?
I think when you look at the list of business delegations on the government websites of the UK, it actually shows a quite interesting mix of companies, so which tells a lot what the UK wants to explore in China's fast and tech market and vice versa. So what is worth noting is that there's no representative this time from the luxury sector, except supercars. But they are mostly, business professional services like banks, buy-side firms, law firms, tourism, and museums. And that is what China wanting most from the UK right now at the moment, despite what I said a moment ago about the lack of outcome so far. Because Chinese consumers are currently undergoing a subtle shift in consumption towards consuming more services and experiences after COVID reopening. This kind of also coincides with Chinese authorities' efforts to deepen service sector reform just a couple of months ago. I mean, for finance briefly, you can see HSBC, Standard Chartered, and Barclays were there too. So I guess that, maybe expect deeper collaborations between the financial centers, the City of London and Hong Kong, and maybe Shanghai too, on strengthening financial ties, like the financial dialogue that the previous person said about between the two, and to facilitate, hopefully, the RMB internationalization, for example. And I think lastly, at least a third of the delegation is from the cultural and entertainment sectors, so museum and art. And I think China wanted to borrow UK soft power to soften China's image in Britain.
That's a very interesting point, because of course Europe is clearly in between a very difficult situation at the moment. But do you think there's a sense in which in London, in Brussels, in Paris, in Berlin, that people are thinking, well, Mr. Trump won't be around forever, and when we face a less intense focus on who we partner with, perhaps, that actually we should start building stronger relations with China now?
No, I don't think so. I think that the stated aim of this visit is to forge, closer economic ties with China on the surface, right? But this does not make logical sense in my view, because cultivating and deepening dependency on one another's comparative advantage in trade, like the goods you produce, for example, say either for final consumption or within your supply chains, will inevitably raise the bargaining power of the bilateral trading partner like China. or the US, which can then be wielded against yourself during periods of heightened tensions. So, for example, the US has used economic integration as a coercive tool to achieve its geopolitics, right, through tariffs. And China is no different, wielding its supply chain choke points, export controls on heavy rare earth to do exactly the same thing. So not to mention the recent use of tourism restrictions to pressure Japan over its comments on Taiwan, for example. So if I'm a middle power in Europe, I would really think carefully before swapping one power for another. Perhaps the best that we can say, I think, is that China is creating a condition that crack the West's strategic alliance by mimicking what the US actually did to the Soviets at the height of the Cold War in the 1970s by luring China away.
Are there things at the sort of interface between business and culture that are attractive to China? I'm thinking about, very famous private schools that now have franchises all over the world, or brands that have very strong association with British heritage. Is any of that compelling, or is that really just sort of window dressing?
I think for example, Britain is obviously the education services sector is actually quite strong in the world stage, and the Chinese and also the Asians community favor their kids to be educated in the UK, myself included. So I think that there is definitely a market for that to keep going. But that also draws a lot of attention internally in the UK that universities are being not infiltrated, but being kind of controlled by the Chinese by donating money over and affecting the direction of research in university for some programs. So there has been some pushback on that front in the UK too.
Kelvin, it's been fascinating talking to you. We thank you very much indeed for your analysis from London. Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business stories of the day with Andy Mioch. Don't go away.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories. Welcome to Gabala. Hi, Candy. One important note to this. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back to Primetime. Now for a look at the day's business news. Andy Mioch has joined us. Andy, what's on the agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, we'll be taking a look at the latest interest rate decision in the United States, the sale of Lukoil's foreign assets, a new high for the Australian dollar, and there's some news out of the AI and chips world. So let's get started. First up, the Federal Reserve has decided to maintain interest rates, citing elevated inflation and steady economic growth. This marks another pause in the monetary easing cycle initiated in late 2024, with no clear indication of when rates might be cut again.
The Fed held interest rates steady on Wednesday, citing still elevated inflation alongside solid economic growth, and giving little indication in its latest policy statement of when borrowing costs might fall again. The decision to maintain borrowing costs at their current level puts the Fed's current monetary easing cycle, begun near the end of the Biden administration, and continued after a pause of roughly 9 months during President Donald Trump's second term, on hold again after 3/4 percentage point reductions at the central bank's final 3 meetings of 2025. In its post-meeting statement, the central bank said job gains have remained low, and the unemployment rate has shown some signs of stabilization, with inflation remaining somewhat elevated.
The Australian dollar reached a 3-year peak, fueled by rising gold prices and expectations of an imminent rate hike, while the New Zealand dollar also experienced gains.
The Australian dollar scaled a new 3-year peak on Thursday as gold prices surged to yet another record, and bets grew for an imminent rate hike at home, helping also lift its Kiwi cousin to a 7-month top. Overnight, the US dollar got some respite from a sell-off as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Washington has a strong dollar policy after President Donald Trump brushed off the recent slide in the currency. A slightly hawkish Federal Reserve that held rates steady, citing a solid economy, also helped the greenback as markets pushed out the expected timing for the next rate cut to June after Chair Jerome Powell's term ends in May. The Aussie hit an intraday high of 75 cents after rising 0.4% overnight for its 8th straight session of gains. Prices for gold, a major Australian export, hit a new peak of nearly $5,600 an ounce on Thursday. The Aussie was down 0.2% in Asian trade as investor sentiment in share markets turned after mixed earnings from the US tech giants. Across the Tasman Sea, the New Zealand dollar also eased 0.2%, having hit a 7-month peak of $0.607 earlier in the session.
Over in Germany, Deutsche Bank posted its largest annual profit since 2007 after a stronger than expected fourth quarter, just a day after police searched the bank in an alleged money laundering probe.
A day after Frankfurt prosecutors raided Germany's largest lender, Deutsche Bank on Thursday posted its largest annual profit since 2007 after a stronger than expected fourth quarter. The bank recorded net profit attributable to shareholders of $7.3 billion for 2025, helped by strength at its global investment bank. It was slightly ahead of analyst expectations. Its 6th consecutive year in the black is welcome. After a rocky decade saw big losses and fears among regulators, the bank was teetering. The 2025 financial year also closes out a 3-year financial plan. The bank pledged and met a key profit target, so-called return on tangible equity of more than 10%. The results were overshadowed by prosecutors' searches this week, highlighting a recurring issue of money laundering lapses at Deutsche Bank over the last decade. Frankfurt prosecutors said they were investigating as yet unidentified individuals and bank employees. 2 insiders told Reuters the case involved transactions between 2013 and 2018. Deutsche Bank said it was cooperating.
U.S. private equity firm Carlyle Group has agreed to buy most of Lukoil's foreign assets, worth $22 billion, including refineries in Bulgaria and Romania, as Russia's second-largest oil company is forced to sell due to U.S. sanctions.
Russia's Lukoil has agreed to sell most of its foreign assets worth around $22 billion to US private equity firm Carlyle Group. Neither Lukoil nor Carlyle gave a price for the asset sale, and it still requires approval from the US agency which administers sanctions. The planned sale was announced by both companies on Thursday and comes just as Russian, Ukrainian, and US negotiators try to reach a deal to end the Ukraine war. Under US sanctions related to Russia's actions in Ukraine, the US Treasury had given Lukoil until February 28th to sell its global portfolio. If it goes through, the sale would end the foreign expansion of Lukoil, Russia's number 2 oil company. Lukoil said in a statement it had agreed with Carlyle to sell its unit, which oversees the company's foreign assets. These include operations in Europe, the Middle East, Africa, Central Asia, and Mexico, and range from a controlling stake in a sprawling Iraqi oil field to refineries in Bulgaria and Romania. Lukoil and Russia's largest oil producer Rosneft were sanctioned by the US last October. It was part of a push by US President Donald Trump to force Russia to agree on a deal to end the conflict in Ukraine.
In AI technology news, following reports that Beijing greenlit imports of NVIDIA's H200 artificial intelligence chips, the company's CEO said the license is being finalized and expressed hopes for a favorable decision by Chinese authorities.
NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang said on Thursday he hopes China will allow the US technology giant to sell its powerful H200 artificial intelligence chip in the country and that the license is being finalized. Huang arrived in Taipei after a trip to China, where he said he met customers, partners, and government officials. Huang told reporters he will wait patiently for a favorable decision from the Chinese government. His comments mark a shift from earlier reports that cited sources as saying China had already approved its first batch of H200 chip imports, suggesting the approval process is not yet complete. The H200, NVIDIA's second most powerful AI chip, has emerged as a major flashpoint in US-China relations. Despite strong demand from Chinese firms and US approval for exports, Beijing's hesitation to allow imports has been the main barrier to shipments.
Still with chips, Samsung Electronics forecast a worsening chip shortage this year, driven by the AI boom, with strong memory demand benefiting its mainstay chip business, but creating headwinds for its other units like smartphones and displays.
Samsung Electronics is forecasting a chip shortage will worsen this year, driven by the AI boom. The South Korean company on Thursday said its operating profit more than tripled to a record high in the fourth quarter. It underscores the strong pricing power of the world's top memory chip maker as the race to build artificial intelligence strains chip supply and boosts prices. With Apple and Samsung as customers, its shares fell 1.2% after a sharp rally this year. The company expected any expansion of memory chip supply to be limited in 2026 and 2027, while AI-related demand remains strong. Operating profit at Samsung's chip business, its main cash cow, surged 470% to a record high $11.4 billion in the fourth quarter from a year earlier. In contrast, its mobile profit declined by 10% to $1.3 billion, squeezed by the surging chip prices. The company's mobile and display businesses warned of a challenging year as they face cost pressures from memory price hikes. Samsung said it is already producing its next-generation high-bandwidth memory chips, or HBM4. It plans to ship them in February at the request of a major customer, apparently referring to NVIDIA.
And that is all in the business brief for tonight. Handing it back over to you, Guy.
Difficult conditions for some of those companies, Andy, but good to see nobody cashing in their chips just yet. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, after the break, we'll be back with more news and analysis from around the world. Do stay with us. world business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
It's too risky to stop and film outside, so we stay inside the vehicle.
We're dealing with an individual and with a regime that will not be satisfied with the mere reimposition of its authority.
Notre position est claire. Monsieur Kadhafi doit partir.
It is time for Gaddafi to go.
اليوم ليس هذه الأماني والطموح اللي كنا نحلم بها في 2011.
دولة ملكنة في بعض المشاكل الميليشيات هذه الصايرة في برنامج البلاد في ليبيا معناها.
الحصول على هذا المستوى ليس بالأمر السهل في دولة تشهد عدم استقرار سياسي من حوالي أكثر من 14 سنة.
لو ما تدخلش الجانب التركي وحاول انه هو يهدي الوضع، يوم احنا تحولت هذه الحرب لحرب اهليه.
We're having the infrastructure to produce 11 BCM cubic meter of gas per year.
هو إشارة قوية بأن ليبيا وصلت إلى مستوى من الاستقرار لا يمكن أن تعود به إلى الخلف.
Welcome back to PrimeTime. Okay, let's catch up on some top stories from around the world. Well, Donald Trump has issued a blunt warning to Iran. Strike a nuclear deal or face consequences far harsher than last June. Well, Tehran has fired back, threatening action against the US, Israel and their allies. All of this, of course, is unfolding as American military assets continue to build up across the Middle East.
To begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions. U.S. President Donald Trump has warned Iran that time is running out to reach a new nuclear deal as the United States continues to build up its military presence in the Gulf. In a social media post, Trump urged Tehran to return to negotiations and rule out nuclear weapons, adding that a massive armada is heading to Iran. He warned that failure to reach an agreement could lead to a far more severe US attack than last year's Operation Midnight Hammer on Iranian nuclear sites. Iran responded quickly with Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi saying it had not requested talks with the US and communicates only through mediators such as US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Tehran says it is open to respectful dialogue but will defend itself if provoked, insisting its nuclear program is peaceful.
There has been no contact between me and Mr. Witkoff in recent days, nor has any request for negotiations been made by us. Various intermediaries have, of course, been in touch. Different countries are trying, in good faith, to play a role, and we are in contact with them, but no decision has yet been taken, and there has been no request from our side. Our position is clear. Negotiations cannot take place under threats, and any talks must be conducted in conditions where threats and excessive demands are set aside.
On Tuesday, Trump said another US armada was heading towards Iran and expressed hope that Tehran would reach a deal with Washington.
Right at the end, they were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal.
And they'll land down here or over here?
White House officials say the move to boost its military presence in the Middle East, in Jordan, Qatar and the Indian Ocean is a defensive one, but also to put pressure on Tehran. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian told Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince that Tehran supports any legal process to prevent war, with both sides suggest dialogue is still possible. The treats come after nationwide protests over the collapse of the currency evolved into a wider challenge to the leadership. Human rights groups say thousands have been killed, though Iranian authorities dispute the figures. Tensions remain high, with both Washington and Tehran warning of serious consequences if diplomacy fails.
Well, as political pressure grows inside Iran, prolonged internet disruptions are adding to daily strain, hitting livelihoods, cutting off access to information, and deepening a sense of isolation. This report hears directly from Iranians on how these restrictions are reshaping work and the way people stay connected.
For many across Iran, the outage has become another daily struggle layered on top of months of uncertainty. Iranian citizens and businesses continue to suffer from a nationwide internet blackout imposed as authorities deployed heavy force to suppress widespread anti-government protests. The shutdown, in place since January 8th, has disrupted commerce in an already fragile economy.
I think it's been 17 days since we've had no internet. We have no information from outside. We don't know anything about what happened in our city, in our country. We've been cut off from all the people we knew, and even from people who live outside of Iran.
Online employees say the blackout has hit their earnings hard and left families unable to communicate.
I have a series of classes. I teach. In fact, my online classes were cancelled, and naturally I lost money, and I'm still losing money.
The effect was that my classes were cancelled, my income stopped, and I also have another job. I am a book translator. I was translating books, and when translators work, they have to use sources like ChatGPT and Google Translate and all kinds of dictionaries, which were not accessible, and everything was closed.
Iranians also say the prolonged internet shutdown has left young Iranians feeling cut off from the modern world and deprived of basic access to information.
This period has been very difficult because, for example, a young person like me was thinking that it is now 2026 in the world. Everything is progressing. Conferences, special seminars are being held. The internet and applications are being developed. And we are living in a place where our natural right to have the internet and free access to news has been blocked. This right has been taken from us.
While limited access exists to domestic websites and school networks, broader connection to the global internet remains blocked, leaving Iranian businesses struggling to operate normally.
The United Nations is pressing all sides to commit to the second stage of the Gaza ceasefire. Now, the focus is on easing tensions, reinforcing security, and setting the groundwork for further Israeli troop pullbacks. Officials say any disarmament of armed groups would be tied to phased withdrawals overseen by the US, Egypt, and Qatar.
demilitarization of Gaza will include an internationally funded weapons buyback program. That is according to what the United States has told the UN Security Council. Speaking on Wednesday, US Ambassador Mike Waltz said weapons held by militant groups would be decommissioned through an agreed process. The plan is part of a broader ceasefire arrangement reached in October. Palestinian militant group Hamas retains control of just under half of Gaza following an October ceasefire deal brokered by US President Donald Trump. The agreement ties further Israeli troop withdrawals to Hamas giving up its weapons. Washington says it will pressure Hamas to disarm, working with 26 countries that have joined President Donald Trump's Board of Peace. The board also operates in consultation with the Palestinian National Committee.
Hamas must not have any role in the governance of Gaza directly or indirectly in any form, period. All military, terror, and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapon production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. International, independent monitors will supervise a process of demilitarization of Gaza to include placing weapons permanently beyond use through an agreed process of decommissioning and supported by an internationally funded buyback and reintegration program.
Sources say Hamas has agreed to discuss disarmament with other Palestinian factions and mediators. However, two Hamas officials told Reuters they have not received any detailed proposal from the United States or from mediators. Israel says Hamas remains heavily armed. Israeli Ambassador Danny Danon raised the issue at the Security Council.
Hamas still remains heavily armed. Let me show you the numbers. It still holds thousands of rockets, anti-tank missiles, and tens of thousands of Kalashnikov rifles. In total, Hamas still holds roughly 60,000 assault rifles. These weapons are used not only against us, against Israel, but against Gazans who oppose Hamas rule.
In November, the Security Council approved the Board of Peace through 2027, focused only on Gaza. The board will help manage reconstruction and deploy a temporary international force. US Ambassador Mike Waltz said the force would improve security and allow Israeli troops to withdraw as Gaza is demilitarized under oversight by the United States, Egypt and Qatar.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at fresh talks between Baku and Brussels on deepening energy cooperation. Stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
It's too risky to stop and film outside, so we stay inside the vehicle.
We're dealing with an individual and with a regime that will not be satisfied with the mere reimposition of its authority.
Notre position est claire. Monsieur Kadhafi doit partir.
It is time for Gaddafi to go.
اليوم ليس هذه الأماني والطموح اللي كنا نحلم بها في 2011.
دولة ملكنة في بعض المشاكل الميليشيات هذه صايرة في برنامج البلاد في ليبيا معناها.
الحصول على هذا المستوى ليس بالأمر السهل في دولة تشهد عدم استقرار سياسي من حوالي أكثر من 14 سنة.
لو ما تدخلش الجانب التركي وحاول انه هو يهدي الوضع، اليوم احنا تحولت هذه الحرب لحرب اهليه.
We're having the infrastructure to produce 11 BCM cubic meter of gas per year.
هو إشارة قوية بأن ليبيا وصلت إلى مستوى من الاستقرار لا يمكن أن تعود به إلى الخلف.
visit from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note.
To Fierce.
I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are recording on the 8th of November. Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, Port Ainud.
A warm welcome back to Primetime. Azerbaijan's energy minister, Parviz Shahbazov, has been in talks with Gert-Jan Koopman from the European Commission, with both sides looking at ways to deepen energy cooperation between Baku and Brussels. Well, the talks have centred on renewables, including solar and wind, alongside gas deliveries to Europe, which climbed to nearly 13 billion cubic metres last year. They also reviewed major electricity transmission projects, from Black Sea routes to a proposed green energy corridor linking the Caspian to Europe, all aimed, of course, at reinforcing long-term energy security. Well, joining me now in the studio is Chingiz Mamadov, research alumni at the National Endowment for Democracy and the Woodrow Wilson International Centre for Scholars. He focuses on energy security and regional connectivity. Chingiz, it really is great to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for inviting.
It's interesting, this, isn't it? When you look at these talks, do you think this is more about short-term supply, or is the EU now attempting to lock Azerbaijan into its long-term energy strategy?
In my personal opinion, this is more about long-term strategy. We should start, I think, from energy supply to Europe from Russia. Because previously about 25, 27, sometimes 30% of oil was coming from Russia to European Union, and approximately slightly less than half of gas supply. Can you imagine? Half of gas supply to Europe was coming from Russia. Of course, with the start of war between Russia and Ukraine, Europe should diversify its energy supply, and one of options was exactly Azerbaijan. Of course, Azerbaijan cannot be major supplier, neither oil nor gas to Europe, because numbers, you know. But right now, Azerbaijan supplies somewhere 4 to 5% of oil to European Union out of total EU consumption, and almost the same amount of percentage amount of natural gas. There are plans to increase share of Azerbaijan in European gas supply by 2 times, to double it, so to approximately 7-8%. And it's realistic. But now more talks are about supply of renewable energy to European Union, because this is also a long-term strategy of EU to reduce carbon emissions, to promote green energy, especially energy not only which is produced within EU, but also energy that comes from EU from the outside.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we look to energy balance right now in European Union, now it's shifted more to liquidated natural gas, coming mainly from the United States. Approximately somewhere about 40% of natural gas is coming from the United States. But we know that nowadays we have certain also tensions between EU and United States. Plus, of course, price. Price is also important because it's slightly more expensive. That's why Europe thinks about diversifying its energy supply, and Azerbaijan is one option. And Azerbaijan acts here in two capacities: first as a supplier, and second as a connectivity between Europe and Greater Caspian region, which may include also other Caspian states like Kazakhstan, first of all, and possibly, potentially, Turkmenistan. It's easier with Kazakhstan because the supply of oil is more flexible. Gas requires infrastructure, plus, there are also political considerations because Caspian Sea is divided shared by 5 littoral states. 2 of them are Russia and Iran, so it puts, some political issue, brings to the table. That's why Azerbaijan can play an important role as both supplier, but also as connectivity.
Yes.
Kazakhstan oil can be easily brought to European market, and it's already there. Azerbaijan already provides, mainly by tankers. Kazakhstan oil is coming from Aktau to Azerbaijan, and then by 2 ways. First of all, by railroad, and secondly by pipeline, which goes through Georgia, through Turkey, and to European Union. So Azerbaijan acts as a. Plus, EU considers Azerbaijan as a reliable partner.
Yes.
It's written in the strategic documents of EU that Azerbaijan is considered as a reliable partner regarding energy supply to Europe.
And this role, this picture you paint of Azerbaijan as a strategic conduit to Central Asia as well, very, very interesting indeed. We're hearing that more and more, aren't we, in these discussions. Renewables, as you say, clearly now a major part of the conversation. How realistic do you think it is for Europe going forward to start to see Azerbaijan as a major green energy partner?
I think it would be unrealistic to say that Azerbaijan will be kind of the bigger provider of green energy or renewable energy to Europe. No. But when it comes to security and diversification, sometimes even not, let's say, bigger share, even relatively smaller share can play important role, at least for negotiations, because energy market is very complicated. You have to discuss price, you have to discuss long-term priorities, infrastructure. For example, gas projects are long-term projects, usually ranging from 10 to 20 years, because it requires big infrastructure in the place. And Azerbaijan, for example, can easily increase gas production, but there should be buyers of this gas. Plus, there should be investments in advance. And Azerbaijan, and President of Azerbaijan stated this, that if Europe wants more gas from Azerbaijan, in this case, there should be long-term contracts with appropriate infrastructure to bring this gas from Azerbaijan to Europe. The same is related, for example, about cable under the Black Sea. This has been already discussed for some time. It requires both I think 3 elements: political element, technological element, and economic element. Political desire is present, and it's not a problem because it involves all friendly countries like Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey. No problem with that. Regarding technical and technological part, it's also easy because there is already capacity. There are technologies. For example, there are cables on the North Sea. There are cables, in the Mediterranean Sea. So it's not a problem. Issue it comes with economy. How economic, how valuable will be this cable? I think it's still valuable and viable. Why? Because Europe very often takes into account not only price, but also other elements like, reducing carbon emissions, bringing green energy. So I think in the longer perspective, this has potential to be realized.
It's very interesting when you look at energy, you look at the role Azerbaijan's playing, you look at connectivity. Azerbaijan has good relations with the US, good relations with China, increasingly strategic relations with European leaders. Is this part of a strategy of really making Azerbaijan indispensable as this sort of central hub for connectivity?
I think Azerbaijan has reached already a certain, let's say, level of in achieving this goal. We already see that United States consider Azerbaijan, and there is currently a document on strategic partnership between United States and Azerbaijan under preparation, and most likely in the near future it will be realized. European Union also, let's start from, I think it was 2022 in July, when major memorandum was signed between European Union and Azerbaijan. And since then, there are several bodies established. For example, Southern Gas Corridor Advisory Council plus Green Energy Advisory Council. And they meet regularly. These are very important meetings. You know, sometimes it's not even in the media, but it's happening. You mentioned about recent meeting between Minister of Energy and Mr. Kopman from EU. But these meetings are happening regularly. So this agenda is promoted, is advanced. And I think that Azerbaijan, yes, is considered both by European Union, by the United States, plus by the countries around the Caspian Sea, I mean mainly Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, as a reliable partner. Plus Azerbaijan is also the most active member, I would say, of the Organization of Turkic States.
Yes.
Organization of Turkic States is very important because this is connectivity between Central Asia, Turkestan and Turkey. So I think Azerbaijan is really becoming indispensable both for, say, major players, including China. China also is, China is making big investments in Inaklia. This is port on the Black Sea, Georgian port on the Black Sea, plus, other investments. Even in Azerbaijan, China makes big investments. So I think Azerbaijan somehow, very often it's called balanced politics. Somehow I don't like balanced, I like, say, proactive position of Azerbaijan in introducing opportunities and in realizing these opportunities. And let's recall, when actually these major pipelines, I recall back in the 90s, there were big, resistance. Even US companies resisted to, finance these projects. But you remember, Heydar Aliyev at that time, let's say, we will finance it. And we financed not only our portion, but we financed also portion in Georgia and in Turkey as well. At that time, there was skepticism whether, these investments will be paid back. But time has passed, and these investments were not only paid back, but brought big revenues to Azerbaijan.
Yeah, indeed, that vision was certainly realised. Let's talk about vulnerability. How vulnerable is Europe, really? How much of this is a sort of a smokescreen for other strategies they want to deploy? Talk to us about the realities of energy vulnerability in Europe. And then also 13 billion cubic metres of gas flows to Europe last year. I mean, what role is Baku playing in reducing that vulnerability?
As I've said, Azerbaijan plays significant role in reducing, because even relatively small portion, like 4-5%, it sounds like a small number. But when it comes to reality, especially certain part of Europe, Southern Europe, Italy, Balkan states, Azerbaijan is a major supplier to these countries. Less to Central Europe, to Germany, to Austria, to central part of Europe. But even, for example, for France, France is receiving, France, sometimes proud itself that, we don't depend on Azerbaijani oil, we conduct independent policy. But look, they are getting most of their electricity from nuclear power plants, about 80%. And recently, supply from Africa for, uranium has been reduced. Now they are trying to bring from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan. But uranium could be transported only through land. It's prohibited to do it through air. Prohibited by international conventions. Again, how France will do that? So I think the change in France's position relatively recently, let's say during last year and a half, in regarding whatever happens in our region, is partly because France understands that without Azerbaijan, they will not be able to provide security to their energy supply.
That's very interesting. So obviously France plays a significant role within Europe. It is not the biggest economy, but it is certainly one of the biggest within the bloc. And your analysis is that their attitudes towards Azerbaijan have softened as a necessity of realizing their own vulnerability and also what Baku has to offer.
This is one of the factors. I think, taken overall, I think France understood that their previous position, it was complete failure. Because, unbalanced position supporting Armenia at any cost actually damaged France's economy. And France's economy not in a good shape overall. So Azerbaijan was one of the biggest consumers of French goods. Second consideration, of course, electric energy produced in France from nuclear power plants requires resources which could be brought from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are major suppliers of uranium, not only for Europe, not only for France, but for the United States. So that's why, again, because it could be transported only through land, Azerbaijan acquires special importance for countries like France.
And just tell us a bit more about some of these projects you've mentioned, the Black Sea transmission routes, Caspian Europe Green Corridor. What is the current status of those projects and what more needs to be done to develop them?
They are at different stages. For example, increasing gas supply requires investments. So this could be done relatively easily, but only if Europe invests into infrastructure. Plus, long-term contracts are required. Regarding cable under the Black Sea, it requires huge investments. As I mentioned, political consideration, very positive. Technology is also, no problems with that. But it's very expensive project, no doubt about that. But still, it could be realized because, as I've said, Europe wants to diversify its economy, Secondly, Europe is looking towards green development overall. They want clean air, clean water, and European actually population is already used to these standards. But it requires, calculations. It will require calculations from Azerbaijani side, from Georgian side, because this cable will bring, let's say, wind and solar energy from Azerbaijan mainly, but hydro power energy from Georgia. Georgia has also surplus of hydro energy, so which could be also transported through the cable through the Black Sea.
And finally, I just want to get your perspective on the extent to which you think all of this activity now provides Azerbaijan with significant political leverage to use with the EU.
No doubt that relations between the EU and Azerbaijan are complicated, say it soft. Complicated. There are many issues. For example, some tensions, disagreement over human rights, no doubt on that. But I think taken overall, Europe also realizes that, kind of approach which they used, these are our standards, which you should act like us. I think
sort of superior.
Yes, superior. Yeah. I think little by little this approach, kind of diminishes. They understand that countries have their own history. I am not, speaking about, like BC, about, no, we will have our own past. No, it's not about having own past, but there are particularities which should be taken into account. And I think it's very useful for Azerbaijan to cooperate with Europe. Europe has reached very big, standards in many areas. Regarding, clean energy, regarding quality of life. And I think Azerbaijan can benefit from that. And I think cooperation in the sphere of energy and energy security keeps this channel between Europe and Azerbaijan open. So if channel is open, today you may speak about energy security. Tomorrow, if there is communication, you may speak about other issues as well. So I consider this not only like energy cooperation per se, but I look to broader picture. This is very important, importance of bigger relations between Europe and Azerbaijan. And I think Azerbaijan is on the right path. And Europe also, I think, took into account certain realities, especially now they abandoned their position which they took during 44 days war. Now they accept that Azerbaijan is a sovereign country, that language that they speak with Azerbaijan previously was unacceptable. They changed their language, we changed our position, and I think there are good prospects for cooperation.
Very good point. Mr. Mammadov, it's been a joy to have you with us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at ASEAN talks in the Philippines as regional leaders grapple with security tensions, conflict and border disputes. Don't go away. On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Shaken to its very foundation.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Hello, I'm Jay. Challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note.
To Fierce.
I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting on the 8th of November. Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kyiv, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent, Almaty, Kazakhstan, Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul for A News.
Welcome back to Primetime. Foreign ministers from across Southeast Asia have been meeting in the Philippines with talks focusing on rising tensions in the South China Sea, Myanmar's deepening civil conflict, and a growing border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. Well, held under the Philippines' chairmanship, the meeting is expected to shape ASEAN's priorities for the year ahead. Foreign Minister Teresa Lazaro described the global security climate as challenging and complex, while stressing a commitment to international law and dialogue. ASEAN leaders are also aiming to finalise a long-delayed code of conduct for the South China Sea later this year.
More complex and interconnected. Across our region, we continue to see tensions at sea, protracted.
Joining us now to discuss this in detail is Helmi Aji, an ASEAN Affairs observer based in Jakarta. He closely follows regional diplomacy, security dynamics, and how Southeast Asian states manage this growing geopolitical pressure. Helmi, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the show. Very, very difficult situation this, very complex, but from ASEAN's point of view, how serious are the tensions right now in the South China Sea? And is there a sense in any way that the risks are rising?
Well, thank you, guys. Yeah, it's one of the most
discussed issue in the Southeast Asia region. In recent years, we have seen confrontations in the sea, particularly between China and the Philippines, that holds this year's ASEAN chairmanship. Unlike other claimants such as Vietnam, Brunei, and Malaysia, the Philippines has openly condemned China's growing assertive actions repeatedly, and even the Philippines publicized videos and pictures of Chinese forces using powerful water cannons and dangerous blocking maneuvers. And in 2026, the in the Philippines chairmanship, as I noted, the Philippine Foreign Minister Teresa Lazaro also vowed that Manila would continue to uphold international rules-based order and maintain ASEAN's adherence to principle of restraints and dialogue and international law in response to global security environment that has become more challenging and more complex and interconnected. And this was in response to growing challenges in global economic, and then the unilateral military action against Venezuela by the US, which have raised concerns over the erosion of unpredictability of great power behavior. And as I mentioned before, US unilateral action against Venezuela signaled a growing unpredictability of great power behavior, whoever it is. Not, we're not talking only US, it can also be anyone. Therefore, ASEAN should remain on high alert and be open to peaceful and constructive dialogue, particularly in matters relating to the South China Sea.
Okay, I mean, Myanmar remains a concern, I think, for everyone. Nobody, of course, would belittle this sincere, constructive dialogue that you've mentioned. But in real terms, is ASEAN really making any practical progress, or are divisions within the bloc sort of limiting its efficacy?
Okay. Recently, I saw a positive sign toward peace building in Myanmar. Minister Lazaro's recent visit to Myanmar has indicated ASEAN's real efforts in building peace in Myanmar under the chairmanship of the Philippines. But the question remains on how ASEAN will engage post-election Myanmar. And because the election, the three-phase election that recently concluded was deemed fell short of fair and democratic values. That's why ASEAN decided not to send observers to the election. And this retreat or the meeting of ASEAN foreign minister also served as a platform for Minister Lazaro to present the results of her dialogues with the ruling generals and officials in Myanmar, as well as the oppositions, because she recently visited Myanmar. And I think in the next 1 or 2 days, we'll see the development and the outcome of the retreat.
Fresh border disputes between Cambodia and Thailand, as we've mentioned. Frankly speaking, how worried are you about those potential flashpoints, and how worried, crucially, is the ASEAN leadership?
Okay, this dispute has raised a question about ASEAN centrality itself, because ASEAN countries has a norm of resolving issues, particularly security issues internally within the bloc, and Cambodia preferring dispute settlement through the United Nations Security Council and through the International Court of Justice, while Thailand's desire through bilateral frameworks show their lack of faith in ASEAN in its ability to resolve conflict and its frameworks regarding conflict settlement. And it clearly violates ASEAN norm of solving security issues internally within the bloc. And this dispute also highlights ASEAN inability to work as a unit. And as we see the development last year, where the tensions between Cambodia and Cambodia and Thailand ended with a peace, with a truce brokered by Malaysia under U.S. President Donald Trump pressure. So I think this also highlights ASEAN's inability to work as a unit and raised a question about ASEAN centrality.
And as you rightly say, Philippines are in charge. They're setting the agenda this year. What tone is Manila trying to set here, do you think? Is it about being tough? Is it about being more conciliatory, or some nuanced variation of the two?
Okay, I think it's premature to judge early, but based on my observation, ASEAN under Philippine chairmanship will try to keep dialogue open to all parties. And the core DNA of ASEAN is to maintain friendly relations with everyone, including major powers. And I think ASEAN under Philippine chairmanship will try to get everyone on board. And ASEAN has also a history of resolving conflicts through mechanisms such as meeting or dialogue to reach consensus. And we saw this decades ago during the conflict in Cambodia, which also involved Vietnam. And I think ASEAN is also working toward that way in solving conflicts.
And just before we let you go, Helmi, just tell us more about this South China Sea Code of Conduct. What is contained within it, and what do you expect the impact to be? We know, of course, it's been long delayed. Is everybody now looking forward to a positive impact that it's going to create?
Well, under the chairmanship of the Philippines is under pressure to finalize or to conclude the COC, or the Code of Conduct, within the 2026 timeline. But like in the Cambodia and Thailand border dispute, the bloc's ability in addressing issues like tensions in the South China Sea and the intensifying U.S.-China rivalry depends largely on the bloc's unity. And I really hope that the Philippines will make ASEAN more united under its, so that we'll see progress in the next few months or this year.
Helmi, we thank you very much indeed for your analysis, and we appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, after the break, we're going to check in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Do stay with us.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
It's too risky to stop and film outside, so we stay inside the vehicle.
We're dealing with an individual and with a regime that will not be satisfied with the mere reimposition of its authority.
Notre position est claire. M. Kadhafi doit partir.
It is time for Gaddafi to go.
اليوم ليس هذه الأماني والطموح اللي كنا نحلم بها في 2011.
دولة ملكنة في بعض المشاكل الميليشيات هذه صايرة في برنامج البلاد في ليبيا معناها.
الحصول على هذا المستوى ليس بالأمر السهل في دولة تشهد عدم استقرار سياسي من حوالي أكثر من 14 سنة.
لو ما تدخلش الجانب التركي وحاول انه هو يهدي الوضع، يوم احنا تحولت هذه الحرب لحرب اهليه.
We're having the infrastructure to produce 11 BCM cubic meter of gas per year.
هو إشارة قوية بأن ليبيا وصلت إلى مستوى من الاستقرار لا يمكن أن تعود به إلى الخلف.
Welcome back to Prime Time. Now let's head to our correspondents around the world. And the European Union is moving to shore up its defences in the Arctic as transatlantic security dynamics continue to shift. Leaders in Greenland and across the EU are calling for stronger surveillance and greater military readiness, while Brussels looks to shoulder more responsibility for Europe's own security. Well, later today, EU foreign ministers are set to meet to hammer out practical policies for Ukraine and to define Europe's future role on the global stage.
Welcome to this day in Europe, where the bloc is moving to harden its defenses on at least two fronts. In the north, where Greenland demands more surveillance and security, and in Brussels, where EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas warns the continent must shoulder far more of its own security burden. Greenland's prime minister is calling for tighter surveillance and stronger security across the Arctic because of, quote, the way Russia acts now. Standing alongside the Danish prime minister and French president Emmanuel Macron in Paris, Jens Frederik Nielsen argued that Greenland needs more eyes in the sky and better protection at sea to keep pace with mounting geopolitical pressure. Macron framed the moment as a strategic wake-up call for Europe, saying tensions over Greenland and the wider Arctic show why Europeans must reinforce their own defenses in the high north. He said France fully supports more NATO vigilance in the Arctic amid Russia's military posture and China's growing economic footprint there. While the wake-up call theme was also expressed by Kaja Kallas at the European Defence Agency's annual meeting in Brussels, she told assembled defence ministers and officials that Europe can no longer assume Washington will automatically anchor the transatlantic relationship. She warned the biggest shift is happening across the Atlantic with a rethink in D.C.
Arguably, the biggest change in the fundamental reorientation is going on across the Atlantic. A rethinking that has shaken the transatlantic relationship to its foundation. Let me be very clear. We want strong transatlantic ties. The US will remain Europe's partner and ally, but Europe needs to adapt to new realities. Europe is no longer Washington's primary center of gravity. The shift has been ongoing for a while. It is structural, not temporary. It means that Europe must step up. No great power in history has ever outsourced its survival and survived.
All this sets the stage for today's meeting of EU foreign ministers in Brussels, where Kallas and her counterparts will try to turn these warnings into concrete decisions on support for Ukraine and Europe's future role in an increasingly contested world. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Turkey and Uzbekistan are seeking to further deepen their strategic partnership as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met his Uzbek counterpart in Ankara. Now, the talks focused on strengthening bilateral cooperation and reviewing regional and global developments. Our correspondent has more now from Istanbul.
Uzbek President Shavkat Mirziyoyev paid a state visit to Turkey on Thursday for talks with Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan in capital Ankara. After closed-door discussions, the two leaders presided over the fourth meeting of the Turkey-Uzbekistan Strategic Cooperation Council, which was established in 2018. Details of Thursday's meetings, including that between Erdogan and Mirziyoyev, were not immediately available. But according to the Turkish Foreign Ministry, the two leaders were expected to discuss means of enhancing bilateral ties and exchange views on global and regional developments. Thursday's summit comes 1 week after Turkey and Uzbekistan held their first ever bilateral meeting in the so-called 4+4 format. Also held in Ankara, that meeting included both countries' foreign, defense, and interior ministers, along with their national intelligence chiefs. At last week's 4+4 meeting, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan hailed the two countries' close ties, describing relations as a strong partnership with historical, cultural, and geostrategic dimensions. Speaking to A News, Yashar Sara, a Turkish expert in Eurasian affairs, said bilateral ties have deepened dramatically since Mirziyoyev assumed the Uzbek presidency in 2016. Commercial relations in particular have broadened significantly, with total trade volumes between the two countries surpassing $3 billion last year. The last time Mirziyoyev visited Turkey was in 2024, when he attended the third meeting of the Cooperation Council. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Tehran is warning it will respond firmly to what it calls a recent military threat from US President Donald Trump, while still leaving space for diplomacy. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says Iran is seeking what he described as a fair and equitable agreement. A News' Touraj Shirililo has more now from Tehran.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has warned the US President Donald Trump of a strong response if Washington strikes Iran, while signaling Tehran's openness to a fair and equitable deal. In reaction to Trump's renewed threat of military action on Wednesday, he said that Iran's armed forces are prepared with their fingers on the trigger. His statement was made in a post on X in which Iran's top diplomat also said that Tehran's valuable lessons learned from the US-Israel 12-day war last June have enabled it to respond more strongly, rapidly, and profoundly. He added that Iran has always welcomed a mutually beneficial, fair, and equitable nuclear deal on equal footing, free from coercion, threats, and intimidation, which ensures Iran's rights to peaceful nuclear technology and guarantees no nuclear weapons. Araghchi reiterated that nuclear weapons have no place in Iran's security calculations and that Iran has never sought to acquire them. On Wednesday, the Iranian foreign minister also said that Tehran has not requested for negotiations with Washington, stressing that talks cannot work under threats. Speaking to reporters on the sidelines of a cabinet meeting about the U.S. military buildup in the region, alongside calls for talks, he said that diplomacy conducted under the pressure of military threats is ineffective. Touraj Shirililo, Tehran, for A News.
Kazakhstan says it lost nearly 4 million tons of oil exports after Ukrainian strikes hit infrastructure links to the Caspian Pipeline Consortium on Russian territory. Now, the Energy Ministry says the pipeline is still operating, and officials insist the situation remains under government control. Well, A News' correspondent in Kazakhstan has the very latest.
Kazakhstan lost around 3.8 million tons of oil exports following attacks on facilities of the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. The figure was announced by Energy Minister Erlan Akıncıyev. He stressed that the tankers attacked near CPC facilities were not linked to the so-called shadow fleet. Oil shipments continued despite higher insurance costs. And in annual terms, the country is not expected to lose anything. The Caspian Pipeline Consortium continues to operate at full capacity, loading 2 tankers per day. Offshore loading units number 1 and 3 are functioning normally, but unit number 2, damaged in the attack, remains in a semi-submerged state. So far, weather conditions and strong internal currents have prevented the unit from being refloated and fully inspected. According to the minister, 2 new offshore loading units have been ordered in the United Arab Emirates and are expected to be delivered within 30 days. The situation remains under special government control, as around 80% of Kazakhstan's export oil is transported through the Caspian Pipeline Consortium. The latest attack on the CPC took place on November 29th. Unmanned boats destroyed an offshore loading unit in the waters of the port of Novorossiysk. Following the incident, Kazakhstan's foreign ministry lodged a protest with Ukraine. The energy ministry said that such actions against purely civilian critical infrastructure were unacceptable and noted that alternative oil export routes were being considered. Ukraine mounted repeated attacks on Russia's oil refineries and crude oil terminals in an attempt to undermine one of the most important sources of income for the Russian war economy. Farida Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Now to other developments around the world. European Union foreign ministers are gathering in Brussels for the Foreign Affairs Council, with talks expected to centre on the conflict in Ukraine, including diplomatic efforts and continued backing for Kyiv. Well, the agenda also covers the Middle East and the African Great Lakes region. Well, ahead of the meeting, Sweden's foreign minister called for tougher pressure on Moscow, including additional sanctions.
Good morning, everyone. Once again, I stand here and I'm quite frustrated, but also determined. I'm frustrated because during the last couple of weeks, due to unacceptable rhetoric by the US, we have been focusing on the wrong things. We need to put more pressure on Russia. That is the only way to stop the killing. And this is why Sweden and Finland have proposed 3 things for the new sanctions package. First of all, we need to impose a full services maritime ban on all Russian vessels that transport energy. Secondly, we need to ban the imports of fertilizers, and that is the 3rd biggest import group coming from Russia. And thirdly, for moral reasons, we need to stop the export of European luxury products to Russia.
Peru is grappling with a huge level of unrest in Lima over interim President Jose Gerry's alleged misconduct. Well, protesters from the Generation Z movement clashed with police on Wednesday, demanding Gerry's resignation amid the political scandal. The scandal, dubbed Chiffergate by local media, centres on Gerry's undisclosed meetings with a Chinese businessman. Now, he denies any wrongdoing, and the earlier rape allegation was dismissed for lack of evidence. Well, in Congress, 6 censure motions and 1 motion to remove Gerry have been filed. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says Germany would not allow its Afghanistan mission to be discredited or belittled. Well, his comments followed remarks by US President Donald Trump during a visit to Davos last week, in which he suggested that America's NATO allies in Afghanistan avoided frontline service. Well, Merz pointed to German soldiers who died during the operation, saying Germany carried out the mission in the interests of the United States.
59 Bundeswehr soldiers have lost their lives during the course of almost 20 years of service in Afghanistan. Well over 100 have been injured, some seriously, in combat operations and attacks. We will not allow this mission, which we also carried out in the interests of our ally, the United States of America, we will not allow this mission to be discredited or belittled. Wir lassen es nicht zu, dass dieser Einsatz heute.
The space agency of Azerbaijan, Azakosmos, has signed a memorandum of understanding with Chad's Electronic Communications and Postal Regulatory Authority. Well, the agreement focuses on cooperation in satellite services and space activities, including spectrum management, satellite communications, and Earth observation. It also envisages the use of satellite and spectrum management technologies, stronger monitoring capabilities, and the involvement of Azerbaijani experts in projects in Chad.
Azakosmos has strong technical capabilities, and with its support, we will be able to implement many projects in Chad. This memorandum will allow us to move forward very quickly. The technical and human capacities are impressive, and this memorandum will not remain on paper.
The memorandum we have signed with Azakosmos is aimed at addressing key challenges such as spectrum management and satellite operations. Azakosmos is a pioneer in this field, and for a vast country like Chad, this cooperation is essential for security and effective control of our space and frequencies. Through this memorandum, we will move quickly toward acquiring satellite and spectrum management software, strengthening our monitoring capabilities, and welcoming Azerbaijani experts to Chad to support studies in security, urban planning, and other key sectors.
Azerbaijan's State Oil Fund has reported a robust showing for 2025, posting healthy investment returns alongside a noticeable rise in assets. Well, the fund has also delivered a major transfer to the state budget, underlining its role in backing long-term national priorities.
The State Oil Fund of Azerbaijan says its assets rose sharply in 2025, reaching $73.5 billion by the end of December, a 22.5% increase compared with the start of the year. According to SOFA's, total revenues for January to December amounted to 37.6 billion manats, about $22.2 billion, while expenditures stood at 14.6 billion manats, around $8.6 billion. Oil and gas sales generated $5.6 billion, with the bulk of revenues coming from the Azeri, Chirag Gunashli and Shah Deniz fields. The fund recorded an investment return of just over 6%, bringing in nearly 6.9 billion manats. A total of 14.5 billion manats, or $8.6 billion, was transferred to the state budget during the year. SOFAS said favourable global financial market conditions supported asset growth with positive returns from fixed income, equities, real assets and gold investments. Rising gold prices also generated significant extra budgetary income.
Overall, the financial markets was very supportive for the portfolio in 2025, and we have produced positive results across all the asset classes. In terms of the main contributor to the portfolio as a part of the local investment performance was the public equities. And of course, the role of the physical gold, the gold performance was very substantial in terms of the overall asset under management growth.
Beyond the numbers, SOFAS emphasised that its mandate goes beyond short-term gains, focusing on the long-term strategic development of the country.
SOFAS supports the national strategic objectives in structural and long-term way. And let me to frame it into three dimensions. First one is the resilience, and second one is the intergenerational value, and the third one is the institutional stewardship. And all of this long-term approach is aligned with our national development priorities, which set in highest level, also include the strategic direction articulated by the President Ilham Aliyev.
The fund emphasised it will continue monitoring global markets and risks, maintaining a diversified strategy to safeguard assets and ensure long-term stability.
Well, that brings us to the end of Prime Time. Please do come back tomorrow and join us for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at A News, thanks for watching.